So today we are going to be working on the last tutorial for this Graphic 45 Midnight Masquerade album, so stay tuned. Hey and howdy everyone, it's Jeannie with Paper Pixie Ink. Welcome back to my channel. Let's dive into tutorial number 3. So today we are going to get started on the back of the third page. And this is another pretty simplistic page, but it has quite a bit of space for photos. So we're going to start by cutting a piece of cardstock to 6.5 by 8 1/4, and we're going to score along the long side at 1/2 inch, so that you end up, after you have folded at your score, with a piece that is 6 inches by 8 1/4 inches to create our flap. And I am going to use a crocodile corner chomper to cut the corners on my flap. And then I'm going to go ahead and attach this to my book. I will add a couple of magnets, one on the flap on the inside and one on my main page, to help hold this closed when the book is open. Alright, so now I'm going to choose a couple pieces of my pattern paper to go on the base page for the back of my third page and the front of my fourth. We will be creating another flap on our front of the fourth page as well, but let's choose our paper so that we can make sure that we have a nice flow. So let's go ahead and choose 2 pieces of pattern paper for our flap as well. So we're going to need 2 pieces that are cut to 5 3/4 by 8 inches. And don't forget that you need to punch or corner chomp the corners of your paper to match your flap as well. So now we're going to move on to the flap on the front of our fourth page. So to create the flap, we're going to need a piece of cardstock that is cut to 4.5 by 7 1/4. And then you're going to score along the long edge at 1/2 inch. So you'll end up with a flap that is 4 inches by 7 1/4 inches. And we're going to corner chomp the corners on this one as well. And now let's go ahead and attach our flap to the right side of the page and go ahead and add our magnets to this one as well. Okay, so now we need 2 pieces of pattern paper to go on our flap, and we're going to need to cut those to 3 3/4 by 7 inches. And I just used 1 piece of pattern paper that I used on both the front and back of my flaps. And don't forget, you're going to need to trim the corners as well. So let's go ahead and choose one of our 4x6 journaling cards to go on top of this. And then we are going to cut a piece of our cardstock to 6 1/4 by 4 1/4. And then we are going to cut a piece of pattern paper to go on the back side of this to 2 3/4 by 4 inches. Now, you may wish, because I'm eyeballing this, I'm not measuring this to exact proportions, so you may wish to glue your 4x6 journaling card to your 6 1/4 by 4 1/4 piece of cardstock, glue that down to your flap, and then measure and cut the piece that will go on the back side of that. Mine happened to measure 2 3/4 by 4. Alright, so moving on to the back of the 4th page. This was the most popular page in my Midnight Tales mini album, and I have done a separate tutorial just on this component, but I'm going to go through it here again. So to get started, we are going to cut a piece of cardstock to 6 inches by 6 inches. Another piece to 6 inches by 6.5 inches, and we're going to score that piece at the 1/2 inch mark so that when you fold over the flap, you're going to have a 6 by 6 inch piece, and you are going to attach those two pieces of cardstock together. And then we're going to cut 2 pieces of cardstock to 1.5 inches by 7 inches. And then you're going to score both of those pieces at the 1/2 inch mark along the long side. Then we're going to grab a ruler and a pencil, and we are going to start creating our flaps. So along the score line that you created on each of these, measure 1 inch down along the score line and make a little tick at the 1 inch mark. Then once you have your little tick made, from the opposite corner, line up your ruler with your 1 inch tick mark and then draw a line straight across. Then on the 1 inch section of this, you're going to measure up 2 inches, and then you're going to draw a line from that 2 inch mark to the 1 inch tick that you made before. And then we're going to go ahead and take a pair of scissors, and we're going to cut out the one section as you can see here in the video. Then we are going to draw score lines along the pencil edges, and we're going to do this for both of these pieces. So I just like using a mat or something underneath when I'm trying to score these. And then we're going to go ahead and fold along all of our score lines. And again, we need to do this with both of these pieces that we cut. And when I fold these on the score lines, I fold it both ways. These are going to be the pieces that will help the components pop up when you open this piece. So I like to make sure that the fold is very, very crisp. So this part gets a little bit more complicated, so hopefully I can explain this as we go. We are going to fold over the piece so the 1/2 inch flap is pointing out, I guess, and you want the 1 inch part to point out as well and line up with the left side of the 6x6 little card that we made. So as you can see, I'm just kind of lining it up. I'm applying glue to the 1/2 inch piece, and the top part, the edge should line up perfectly with the crease in our little 6x6 card. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold over the 1 inch piece back towards the right side, and then I'm going to flip the other fold back towards the left of the card, and the third fold you're going to fold down, and you're going to apply glue on that piece and then adhere it down. So you end up with a piece that looks like this. And again, I do have another tutorial that shows this as well. I'll link it here. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing, but the opposite on the other side. So we are going to fold it over so the 1/2 inch mark, or the 1/2 inch piece, is under with the 1 inch piece pointing out. We're going to apply some glue to the 1/2 inch piece, and then we're going to put it down or glue it down with the 1 inch side facing out, lined up with the bottom and right side. So you can kind of see I'm doing that here. And then I'm going to make sure that it adheres down really well. And then I'm going to flip over the piece. I'm going to flip down, and then I'm going to flip the last fold back over. And then I'm going to apply some glue to that tiny little triangle. And then I'm going to flip my top piece back down and make sure that it adheres really, really well, because this is what controls it. You want to make sure that it's going to stay stuck. Okay, so now we need to make the little pop-up cards that are going to be attached to these sides. So we need to cut 2 pieces of cardstock to 4.5 by 3.5. And then we're going to go ahead and glue those down. And you only need to put glue along the edges of those cards, not on the back of the whole card. And I just had a little bit of excess hanging off, so I just used some scissors to snip that off. Alright, so let's go ahead and choose some pattern paper to put on the base of the back of our 4th page and the inside of our back cover. And don't forget, we did cut a piece of glitter cardstock earlier to 8 1/4 by 8 1/4 to back our cardstock on, or our pattern paper on our back inside cover. We will also need to cut a piece of pattern paper to go on the front of this pop-up component, and we will need to cut that to 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. And then let's go ahead and get all of that glued down. Alright, so now we need to create a closure to hold this closed. I'm just going to take another scrap piece of cardstock that I had. It is roughly 3 3/4 by 1 1/2 inches, and I'm going to score at 3/4 of an inch along the short side just to create a little tab so that I can glue that to the back of this pop-up component. And I'm just going to eyeball placement of it in the center, and then I'm going to take another 2 of my magnets and put one on the little flap and one on the front of my pop-up component, and this will hold it together. So I'm going to go ahead and just glue down my 8 1/4 by 8 1/4 glitter cardstock and then my pattern paper on top of that for the inside back cover, just so I don't get these mixed up with any of my other pattern paper and use something I wasn't meaning to use. So when we created our inside front cover, we cut diagonally a piece of cardstock, and we're going to use the other half of that to create our little diagonal pocket on the inside back cover. So we're just going to go ahead and score at the 1/2 inch mark on both of the sides of this, and then we are going to cut the corner piece off. And then we're going to use our envelope punch to punch the corners just like we did the first time. And then let's go ahead and get that glued down as well. So now we need to cut 2 pieces of glitter cardstock to go on our little closure, and they need to be cut to 1 1/4 by 2 3/4. And then let's go ahead and glue those down as well as our 5 3/4 by 5 3/4 top piece. Alright, so to finish off the inside of our pop-up element, we're going to need to cut one more piece of pattern paper to 5 3/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches, and we will cut 2 of the corners off once we are ready to do that. And then we're going to take a 4x6 journaling card, and we are going to cut that down to 3 3/4 by 5 3/4 to go in the middle. We're going to cut 2 pieces of glitter cardstock to 4 1/4 by 3 1/4, and then we're going to use 2 of our 3x4 journaling cards to go on top of that. And once we have all of our paper cut, let's go ahead and glue everything down. Alright, so to get our 5 3/4 by 5 3/4 piece of pattern paper to fit, I'm just going to take a pencil and mark where the fold is so that I can cut the 2 corners off and have it fit properly. And then I'm going to go ahead and glue it down. Alright, so to finish off our little closure piece, I'm going to use another 3x4 journaling card, and I'm going to cut 2 pieces of cardstock to 4 1/4 by 3 1/4, and I'm going to use them. One is going to be directly behind the journaling card, and one is going to be on the other side of the closure flap. So let's go ahead and get those cut and glue everything together. Now let's go ahead and glue that whole piece down. I'm going to make sure that I get lots of adhesive right up into the edges of our component, because I want to make sure that this stays really, really well, because when you open it up and pop it up, it's going to be kind of pulled on a lot. So we want to make sure that it has a really good stick. Alright, so let's go ahead and finish off the inside back cover. We went ahead and did the glitter cardstock and the pattern paper, and we put on the little corner kind of pocket, but we didn't cover the pocket. So let's go ahead and find some pattern paper that will fit on that, and I'm just going to lay it on it and mark it with a pencil and then cut that diagonally to finish it off. Let's quickly make the inserts for our pocket pages. We're going to need to cut 4 pieces of cardstock to 7 3/4 by 8 1/2, and then we are going to use a corner chomper to chomp the top corners. So moving on to the cover, I'm going to take my piece of 8 1/4 by 8 1/4 glitter paper that we cut a while back, and I am just going to top it with this cover image pattern paper from the collection. So let's go ahead and get that done. Alright, so let's go ahead and cut a piece of our glitter cardstock for our spine. And you'll need to cut this to 2 3/8 by 8 1/4. And then we're going to move on to our back cover. Okay, so for our back cover on the original, I used a piece of the ephemera to create the little band on the back, and this time we're going to use one of the chipboard pieces just because it works out really well. It's already kind of punched on both sides, and I'm going to use a piece of my chiffon kind of distressed ribbon that I pick up from Amazon to create the little band. So to attach this to my glitter cardstock on my back, I'm going to use some double-sided adhesive on the back of the glitter cardstock. I did try to glue it, but because the chiffon ribbon creates a bit of a band, it's thicker, I wasn't able to really get it to stick on both the top and the bottom. So I just went with sticking it to the back and keeping it nice and tight and straight so that it will stay in place. And then I went ahead and glued it down to my back. Alright, let's move on to our insert. So we already cut the cardstock. Now let's work on covering them with the pattern paper. So obviously our pattern paper isn't going to be quite tall enough in order to cover these. So I am going to compensate by cutting a piece of glitter cardstock that will go on the top. So we are going to cut 4 pieces of that cardstock to 7.5 by 3/8. And we will need to corner chomp them to match the top. And then we are going to cut our pattern paper to 7.5 by 8. Now, I was running out of paper and I had a lot of scraps. So what I did was I took a lot of my long, thin strips of pattern paper and I glued them all on to another sheet of my cardstock, and then I made sure that it was cut properly to size and glued that down on my cardstock insert that I had already created. So let's go ahead and get all of those done. So now it's time to finish off our spine. We already cut our piece of glitter cardstock for this, so what we're going to do is we're going to take that piece and we are going to measure approximately 4 inches down from the top, and we are going to grab a cutting mat and a craft knife, and we are just going to cut 2 very thin strips about 1.5 inches wide at the 4-inch mark. And then once we're done cutting those 2 strips off, we're going to cut the center of those so that we have a little slot. And then to kind of clean it up and finish it off, I used my 1/8 crocodile punch to just punch 2 circles on either side of it. And then I'm going to cut a piece of my pattern paper to 7 3/4 by 1 5/8. And I'm just going to test that to make sure that it will go in the slot before I go ahead and glue that slot down. When you glue the slot down, make sure that you're only gluing the top half portion and along the left and right edge and bottom of the bottom portion of your glitter cardstock spine piece, because you want to be able to slip this little kind of bookmark in. So let's go ahead and get that done. All right, so let's get the bookmark finished. We're going to go ahead and take the 1/8 inch punch from our crocodile and just punch a hole in the center of the top and or bottom, depending on which way your paper is. And we are going to attach a little gem to it. Now, I bought these off of Amazon. I've used them for making decorative pieces for my house, and I've used them in lots of crafting projects. So they're not bought at a craft store that I've seen, but I was able to get them off of Amazon. So okay, so to finish off my spine, I'm going to choose some ribbon and I'm going to tie it essentially in like a triple bow. I am terrible with bows, so I'm not even going to really show this, but do your best to make it kind of, bushier or so. And then we're going to take the little dangly crystals, the ones that I got from Amazon, and we're just going to use the little ring on it to kind of hook it into the knot on the bow. Alright, so to finish off the album, I'm just going to take as much of my scraps as I can and create some photo mats and tags to tuck in my pockets and my belly bands. So I'm just going to leave it on fast forward through that. It's really whatever you have left that you can, make something with. So Alright, so that's the album and tutorial. I hope everyone enjoyed it. As usual, if you're interested in seeing more, don't forget to click on that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, everyone!